Hey, my name is Chris Brennan, and in this video I'm going to talk about the most fortunate date in August using the principles of electional astrology. So each month when I do the month ahead forecasts, which I just released a few days ago, usually I'll highlight one auspicious electional chart or date during the course of the month. But this month, because there's so much going on and there's so much difficult stuff happening, I actually forgot to mention the most auspicious date for August. So I wanted to do so and release a separate video in order to include that for people that were asking about it. So the most auspicious date in August is actually August 31st, 2024, starting about 9 o'clock in the morning local time, whatever time it is for 9 o'clock in the morning for you in your city, using Libra rising. So if you calculate an astrological chart for August 31st at 9 a.m., you should end up with a chart with Libra rising roughly. So the reason this is the most auspicious electional chart of the month is that the first part of the month, especially the first week or two, is really dominated by the Mercury retrograde, which starts around August 4th and August 5th. And some of the issues surrounding that are things like delays, miscommunications, technical snafus, and different things like that. So that's not really ideal for starting new ventures and undertakings and projects. And as a result of that, it's better to put some things off until later in the month once the Mercury retrograde is complete. And that's one of the things that is nice about this electional chart is it's well after Mercury has stationed direct. So the other thing about earlier parts of the month is that in the second week of August, Mars in the sky will conjoin Jupiter in Gemini, and then right after that, Mars will square Saturn in Pisces. So that's very tense energy, a lot of combative, potentially divisive energy. So it's probably best to steer clear of those configurations as well, especially in the second week of August. Then in the third week of August, we have Jupiter square Saturn, which is bringing a lot of tensions between forces of growth versus forces of consolidation, or different tensions surrounding hope versus optimism. And the same week, transiting Venus swoops through Virgo, where it opposes Saturn, it squares Mars, and also squares Jupiter. So creating some tense additional configurations then between Venus and the other benefics and malefics. So a lot of this makes for a lot of tense combinations that eventually culminate around August 22nd before they start to dissipate and move away from each other and things start to settle down a little bit. So as a result of that, I recommend when I did my yearly elections, when I looked ahead to see the best dates of the year, I really focused on the period towards the end of August as being the most auspicious or the most fortunate, just because it's after the Mercury retrograde and it's after all of those tense configurations have completed and started to move away. So let's talk about the chart itself then at this point, now that I've given that background context. So the chart has Libra rising, and Venus has recently moved out of Virgo and into Libra, which is Venus's home sign. So part of the purpose of this election is it's a really good chart that emphasizes Venus and all of the positive qualities associated with Venus, which are things like unifying and reconciling things. Venus is very good for creative activities, like the arts or even music. Venus is also very good for social things, especially in Libra, since it's an air sign. So this is a really good chart for Venus and doing positive, benefic things, which is helping things to grow and develop and expand. Since the benefics tend to help create things and the malefics sometimes tend to take away from things. So that's part of the focus of this is Venus in the first house. And one of the things with Venus in the first house is it will also make your election or whatever you initiate at that time have a greater potential for aesthetic appeal, since the first house also represents the appearance of whatever you start at that time. So Venus will help it to be not just more harmonious internally and in terms of what you accomplish, but to also appear more symmetrical and sort of visually appealing. So that's one of the good things about the chart. Transiting Venus in the chart has nice sign-based trines from Jupiter at 18 degrees of Gemini. And even though it's very wide still in terms of degree, that is a very helpful overcoming superior trine from Jupiter, which will help to affirm and say yes to whatever Venus wants to signify in the chart. And since Venus is the ruler of the ascendant, it's then essentially saying yes to whatever it is that you're starting at that time, that it will achieve greater success as a result of that. Other things about this chart, we can see that Mercury has station direct in Leo, and Mercury is actually, it has a very close sextile with Jupiter at 18 degrees of Gemini with reception because Jupiter is in Mercury's sign. So this is very helpful and supportive in terms of communication, especially. This should be a good chart for communication in general, and one in which you're able to say things relatively effectively, especially within the context of organizing friends and groups and alliances, because Mercury is in the 11th house, the place of friends and alliances, along with the moon. So speaking of the moon is in early Leo, and the moon is partially applying to a sextile with Jupiter in Gemini. So that's one of the favorable things about this chart is the moon is very well placed in the 11th house of friends and groups, and it's applying to the most positive planet in the chart, which is Jupiter in Gemini in the 9th house. So in terms of the 9th house, that's where we see both some of our most positive things in the chart as well as some of the most challenging things in the chart. With Jupiter in the 9th house, that's relatively positive for travel, and maybe I should mention the 9th house topics because they're mixed here because Jupiter and Mars are placed there in a day chart. So you'll get some of your most positive things and some of your most negative or challenging things coming from that sector of the chart, which is related to education, religion, beliefs, philosophy, but also especially travel and interaction with people from foreign places or from backgrounds that are different than your own. The 9th house is the place of foreign travel, basically. So that's the area of the chart where some of the most positive things will happen due to Jupiter being placed there, but also some of the most negative or challenging things will happen as a result of Mars being placed there. So it's kind of a mixed bag. The primary focus of this election is just Venus being in the 1st house in its own domicile, and the 11th house placements with the moon and Mercury there as signifying friends and groups and alliances. So the last thing about this chart, the rising degree doesn't matter hugely. We just want the ascendant to be somewhere in Libra in your location when you start the election. But then in the reference chart, I have the midheaven around 8 or 9 degrees of Cancer. And the purpose of that is to make it sextile to the sun in order to mitigate the sun's 12th house position. Because the 12th house is not the most ideal house for the sun. It's one of the more challenging houses. However, if you make the midheaven sextile to the sun, then the sun will be mitigated and have some of its more constructive manifestations come about in the 12th house compared to what it could have otherwise. So it'll be much more productive in that sign, which is also helpful since that will help the 11th house planets that are in Leo to not get dragged down by the sun's placement. All right, so let me see. I think that's it. Those are the main things about this electional chart. So this is the best electional chart I could find for August because it allows us to steer clear of all of the tense combinations earlier in the month. Recently, Lisa Scheim and I did find several other charts. I think we found 5 or 6 other charts at different points in the month, which we presented in our Electional Astrology Podcast, which is a podcast we release each month to patrons of the Astrology Podcast who sign up through our page on patreon.com. So if you're looking for more elections that are earlier in the month, then you might want to sign up for that and you'll get access immediately to all of the other electional charts that we presented for different points of August, just in case you can't wait until the end of the month in order to do something and you need to push things forward a little bit earlier, you'll have some options. So other than that, I think that's it for this video to show you the best chart of August. So good luck navigating some of the astrology this month. I hope you get some use out of the election. Let me know what you end up doing with it in the comments. And otherwise, I'll see you again next time. All right. Bye.